Hello, it is wonderful to see you. This is Stuart Berger in Norwalk, California, and it's my honor to welcome you to our Temple of Light service. We just heard music composed and performed by Gary Cortland Miles, and the pieces were entitled Galactic Streams, Oases of Joy, and the Dancing Wu Li Masters. In this hour, we're privileged to hear Susannah Light speaking from Garden Village in Costa Rica, and Anne Blaney and David Barnes speaking from Salmon Arm, British Columbia. To begin our time, these were words that Yolanda spoke to those who were assembled at Sunrise Ranch on September 13th, 1953, as part of a service, and this is entitled Anniversary Meditation. 21 years ago this morning at about 4 o'clock, there was the beginning of that cycle which established this ministry which we share on earth. The 13th, 14th, and 15th days of September mark this anniversary period. The 3 days which in 1932 correlated with the 3 days of the tomb period and the cycles of the resurrection. And on the 16th day of September 1932, our official ministry on earth began. As I mentioned last evening, that commission was not merely to me. It was a commission to be shared by all who would take part in it. And it is to this end that you are here, to share in the fulfillment of that divine commission. I have a very vivid memory of that morning 21 years ago today, when I was awakened early in the morning at the first faint signs of a coming dawn, with a feeling of being virtually overwhelmed with a tremendous restlessness. I got up and walked around the room for a time. I considered dressing and taking a walk out on the streets in the city of Nashville, Tennessee. But somehow that did not seem to be the course of action. So I tried to read, and the printed page was merely a mass of meaningless words. And I thought I would read the Bible for a while, but it too, for that moment, appeared to offer nothing. There was a tablet of paper and a pencil on the table, and after it had caught my eye, I had an urge to sit down at the table. I had no outer awareness of anything which I might write, but I sat down and picked up the pencil, and gradually the room filled with a silvery cloud of light until all of the objects in the room were blotted from my view. And being enfolded in that cloud, I began to write. And in the writing, recorded the answers to questions that had been in my mind for many years, seeking the solution. Gradually, after about an hour and the urge to write had ceased, the cloud disappeared. And I read over with much interest what had been written under my hand. The following morning, on September 14th, I was awakened again at about the same hour, and on arising went immediately to the table. And again the cloud filled the room, and again I was enfolded in that cloud for about an hour. The same thing happened on the morning of September 15th. I have never, since that day, had a similar experience. Just those 3 mornings. And through that experience, the consciousness of the basic principles of reality, which I have presented to you, was presented to my own outer consciousness. At the conclusion of that experience, I knew the answers to the questions. And the questions, in that sense, have not concerned me since that day. The questions of application and service to humanity have concerned me. But for myself, I knew the answers. And I knew the work to which my life, from that moment forward, had to be utterly dedicated. And it is through that ministry that you have been gathered here to share this hour. In recent weeks and months, you have been given an opportunity to begin to understand what we have called the Shekinah pattern of being. And when I speak of that silver cloud that appeared those 3 mornings in succession, I am sure you all recognize the reality of what in olden times was called the Shekinah cloud of glory. I do not suggest that you should try to imitate my experience. I do not suggest that your own outworking should be similar in the sense of the nature of the personal experience, but the principles are the same. And now, over to you, David.
Thank you, Stuart. It's very good to be with everybody on this evening hour of meditation together. Good to be able to speak with Stuart and Susannah and Anne tonight, in particular. About 2 years ago in a temple service, Robert Merriman and I spoke, and the theme of that service related to what came to be titled as a word of good report. And from my standpoint tonight, I think I would like to give a little update on that good word from my perspective. We've moved quite a distance in those 2 years in the cycles of regeneration, following in the way of the Master and his command to follow me in the regeneration, a word he gave to his disciples and for all of us who would follow and walk in that way. In some senses, it seems like we're not so much following anymore, but in a much greater degree walking with the Master in the way. Apparently, this is what happened to Enoch. He walked with God, who was God, walking on earth. And with Noah, who was told to walk before me and be thou perfect. And the Master certainly showed the way to walk in perfection. And he said, be thou perfect and follow me in the regeneration. So something has been happening that has changed the experience of all of us, I feel. If you want to just, I want to use as a reference point, just the last couple of years. It's quite a new heaven, really, that we're all experiencing the emergence of evidence of the emergence of an increasingly unified body. and one voice speaking through that body. Obviously, there's some ceilings to move through and transformations to come and a great deal to change yet, but it's worth noting at this time. The end of this second year of a 7-year air cycle and the beginning of a third year of that 7-year air cycle. The air, of course, relates to the cloud of glory that Stuart read about, the atmosphere of heaven, and the spirit of life moving in the body, which is us and others. I wrote a few things down about an hour before the service started, and I'd like to read them. Just came to me as I was lying quietly. Always using that beautiful phrase, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. And if they're acceptable in your sight, then they're acceptable in the sight of all others who are listening and watching. So in that spirit, I was thinking about things, and I want to read something that I have no way of really proving. Probably wouldn't want to anyway. It may sound a little audacious. It may sound even arrogant. It may sound presumptuous, but it's born of an experience that I've had of, you say, being in heaven with all of you and with the Lord of heaven and earth over the last couple of years. I'm just going to turn my light up here so that I can read what I've written. I said, we have, for the first time since Martin died, and this emissary body fragmented and scattered for a number of years in the 1990s and for a number of years after that. For the first time, we have clear evidence of a new pattern of integration occurring. We have the evidence of the fire of love and the light of truth and the glory of life in focalized expression. And beginning to work as one. Evidence of the presence of the Shekinah pattern of being in focalized representation and expression once again. These three factors are now at work and in action in relationship to the earth of this spiritual body and those who would be drawn to be a part of this spiritual body. In relationship to this earth which is being restored. Under the dominion of and at the command of the Lord of the body, the Lord of Lords. So this is the first time in all these years that the Shekinah pattern of being has been to this degree integrated and inaction, allowing this degree of penetrating power to be released within the design of being and under control. And this is making a huge difference in our experience and in the experience of many people who don't know anything about us yet, and in the experience of the whole world, that which is disintegrating and that which is integrating. There is present men, I emphasize men and women now, who are working together in the heaven to let these four forces focalized in these four levels that we call the Shekinah pattern of being and the one who dwells have its way with us and with the substance that responds, and also the substance that, because of the people who hold it imprisoned, are still rebellious against it. But there are men and women now present who are in dominance, in agreement in this way, in the heaven. And there's a lot to work out in the earth as this proceeds, as we move through sealings and as we continue in this one generation, which was in this cycle initiated by the Master, and in 1932 opened and accelerated and enlarged by Yolanda and carried forward without a flicker of doubt through Martin. And they both did their work impeccably. I've heard a statement over the years by various ones that said, as they considered the development of leadership and the carrying on of the work after Martin died, if Martin couldn't do it, I certainly can't. And I think there is, in considering that statement, a failure to recognize what Yolanda's responsibility was and what Martin's responsibility was and what our responsibility is. I thought I'd read two quotes from Martin. One, 1977, was titled, "Your responsibility is not mine. My job has been to make it possible for the word to be with you. That's my job. Presumably, I couldn't make the word available to be with you if it wasn't in me. I would have no word to make available if it wasn't in me. My job relative to you has been to make it possible for the word to be with you. But your job is to make it possible for the word to be in you. I can't do that. Only you can accept that responsibility as an individual. My ministry is to you, but your ministry is the ministry of the archangel to the world. My job has been to make it possible for the word to be with you. But your ministry begins when the word is in you, and then you are responsible. And so the fate of the world then hangs upon you." Speaking to the individuals of the body who were with him at that time. And then in 1984, a service titled, "Your Job and Mine." And I would note that Eugen was at 100 Mile House at that time, and he spoke in this service with Martin at the beginning of the service. And it's on Great Cosmic Story. You can read the whole of it. But these were Martin's words to the body at that time, and spoken after Eugen spoke, which, by the way, was a very fine articulation, a voice coming through him in representation of the body. But these were Martin's words. This unified, fused body, which has been in the process of taking form, has been for the sole purpose of assuming responsibility for the creative process on earth. This is the responsibility of those individuals who compose this body. This is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to do what I might to allow the body to take form. That's my reason for being present on earth. But that has very little to do with the responsibility which rests upon the individuals who compose the body. For what is to happen is their responsibility, not mine. It is absolutely in the hands of each one who would be a part of this body. I've not really done my job that well. If you, individually speaking, do not assume the responsibility of alignment with the creative process, to the extent that I have done my job well, it leaves you in position to do what you are here to do. But remember, it's not what I am here to do. No use looking to me to get your job done. I'm not here to do that. I was here and have been here to do something else. I suppose if I've done a good job, there comes a point where I am not necessary anymore. That's all right with me. I trust it's all right with you, too. Now, I'm making this distinction principally to bring a little greater intensity to your responsibility, because you can't look to anyone else to do it, least of all, me. This is not the reason for my presence on earth, but it is the reason for yours. And we're not very useful unless we acknowledge the reason for our presence. And so the fire falls from heaven. And that's what we are all here for. But you, in a particular way and a particular sense, and me, in a particular way and a particular sense too. But yours is special. And it doesn't need me at all to do your job. Well, here we are in this new day. Could say without Martin and without Yolanda, and yet, we've all acknowledged that the spirit of these two great ones is always present with us, as is the spirit of the Lord of Lords. And we have been moving in this cycle of regeneration, learning, particularly through the trials and tribulations of that fragmented period that we moved through, and also now through the more recent years of greater accord and harmony and oneness that's appearing in the members of the body. And so we find at this point that there is evidence that this body walks with God. This body is following in the way of the Master. This body, in one sense, walks before the Lord and takes responsibility for what is to happen now and what must continue to happen in the movement and the cycles of regeneration in the days and years to come. And that we will with certainty know that the spirit of love, the spirit of truth, and the spirit of life, and the focalized presence of the God beings who we knew, who brought this body originally into form, is with us. And that those three spirits, love and truth and life, are at work in transforming the earth of this body and making it new, so that oneness is known, love is known, the capacity to work together in the heaven particularly, and not getting too much mixed up in earthly things over which there's often a lot of contention, but keeping the heaven clear so that the evidence of the presence of being with one accord in one place is increasingly ours. And this would make the Lord's heart rejoice, would it not? I want to mention in this regard that Susannah and Anne and I recently spent 9 days together, and this was our focus. And we allowed the experience of what could be called the upper room with, over the period of time, 9 days of unbroken, wonderful generation between the three of us. Walking, talking, listening, moving through ceilings in consciousness together. Sometimes challenging, but never beyond capacity to move through and let go. And so it's a real delight, having had that experience and continuing in that, to have Susannah speak and then have Anne speak as well. So, Susannah, welcome.
Well, greetings. This, I consider this time blessed. Blessed is this evening hour. Blessed is this time that we have together. And we share this time to enliven our consciousness, to enliven our remembrance, and to let this radiant remembrance permeate the earth. From time to time over the ages, there have been certain incarnations, certain prayers and revelations that bring an existential impact to the children of man, to change the course of humankind on earth. And this, I feel, is what has been spoken of and heard thus far within our beloved gathering tonight. I am in wonder. I'm in prayer. So we've heard some really powerful words tonight already in this short time. And some history, which is not actually history, it's present. I sense that the impact of these holy and timeless conveyances such as what Yolanda brought, and Martin, and what was transformed on earth by the Master Jesus. The impact, in many ways, is measured by us. They did some very important work. They left us prayers and open doors. The impact upon this earth in terms of a flourishing creative potential held within those seeds of truth from their eternal voice of prayer depends upon us. And whether we hear, first of all, and whether it has supreme value to us, and whether we're able to focus its power with a single pointed focus for the purpose of true service. So the impact of all this is measured by whether we allow their prayer, which is essentially the word ready to be made flesh, to take its holy place within us as our own reality, which I think is what Martin's words spoke very powerfully to. There is something I take particularly to heart about the prayers of Yolanda, a part of which I'm going to share later on this evening, and the prayer that the Lord Jesus brought before their Heavenly Father on our behalf and on behalf of mankind. We have felt this love. We've been drawn by this love. And we do know that such divine voices of communion between the Father and his elect are powerful beyond all comprehension, and are for the very specific fulfillment and outworking of the Lord's holy will and purposes on earth through us, with us, as one. I feel that days like these days, where we mark important cycles, provide something significant of an opening, something of a vibrational aperture for us who are living in flesh bodies now to step into. Yolanda is not here right now in his physical body, but we are. And we have before us this amazing, brilliant day of beckoning, where we can, in consciousness, remove the time and space elements to some extent and gather ourselves into the prayer that has been activated and extended for us to enliven within right now, for us to flower and move within, full of life, full of grace, as an extension on earth of the eternal prayer of love. Last month, when I visited David and Ann's home in Salmon Arm, we shared 9 days in a time of focused immersion, communing with Yolanda and Martin in particular through the sound and spirit of their voices and writings. I will tell you that Anne and David's living room carries a potent sense of holy presence. The presence of ages and sages throughout time, and the aliveness of a very present and timeless spirit. In that clear and beautiful setting, it could be said that we hosted Martin and Yolanda real time. The sound and the fire was real. On one of those days, we listened to a July 1953 presentation by Yolanda titled "The Challenge of Shekinah, to Set Your Hearts on Fire." I was moved to my core, and I want to share some of that presentation with you tonight. my experience sitting there in the living room with Yolanda and Anne and David, I felt the immediacy of potential to clarify my consciousness to the point where I and we would be able to use a type of spiritual cut and paste function, placing ourselves into that time of the day of Pentecost in the upper room, which Yolanda was referencing, when the Holy Spirit was descending upon those gathered. Instead of making the same mistakes, we would avail ourselves of all the understanding and refinement of consciousness that has been gained over the seemingly large expanse of time. We would tarry there. We would tarry there and allow the truth and the power of the Holy Spirit to come fully upon us so that we can be in perfect service to the Lord and to the children of his world. I felt that this was what Yolanda was praying in his prayer at the end of his talk here, which I'll share. A profoundly moving prayer, a great petition to his Lord and King that he, Yolanda, would be given the words sufficient to inspire us that it is possible to carry this work of releasing the old world patterns and bringing the new cycle of illumination all the way through to victory through us. It felt so immediate and so possible and so true, truly. So I don't think any of us here would want to be the ones to say to Yolanda or to our beloved Lord of Lords that they haven't left us sufficient inspiration, sufficient instruction, or love and possibility. They have left us bountiful inspiration, entirely sufficient to carry through. And it's why we're here. It's the hour that we've come to realize this. So in this moment tonight, I offer you the vivid imagery of welcoming Yolanda into our holy living room setting, all together in one accord. We can omit the illusion of time and space and simply allow Yolanda to be here with us, here within our clear and open and eager hearts. And I think you'll be inspired. After Yolanda speaks, this service hour will be kindly handed over to Anne Blaney. And David, can you bring us Yolanda?
The greatest need from the standpoint of our present function is to reach a point where there is the reality of the Shekinah kingdom and power and glory in our own lives here and now. We recognize that the kingdom aspect is the light aspect of the Shekinah pattern. The power aspect relates to God's love, and the glory to the Shekinah cloud. How can we reach a point where we begin to know the reality of being with one accord in one place. Blessed ones, is the cycle of recreation, the work of recreation, sufficiently important so that we can let it begin to be the basic pattern of the meditation of our hearts? Not that we should be recreated, not that we should be illumined, not that we should become citizens of the kingdom, not to serve ourselves, but first to serve our King, and finally to serve our fellow man. Once we are with one accord in one place, dedicated to that proposition of service, letting the Shekinah pattern of reality act upon the substance that is provided by this unit, we'll begin to have the coming of the day of the New Jerusalem pattern of Pentecost. The New Jerusalem coming down from God out of heaven. Yet a little while. Tonight, what shall our message be to our King? What shall be my report to him? O King of heaven and earth, Almighty One, Supreme One, Lord of all, they who are thy children have decided to wait yet a little while, to wait until they find a more convenient time. And then they shall come together, they say, with one accord in one place, in agreement, that being in agreement with thee, they may finally let thy power manifest. And ye shall receive power. After that the Holy Spirit is come upon you. Shall we send this message to our King? Yet a little while. And I believe, O Lord, that these who have been gathered from the lands, from the north and the south, the east and the west, will reach a point of togetherness in thy Spirit. What shall it be? We must let the New Jerusalem come. For the New Jerusalem is the new manifestation of the Shekinah pattern of being. The new manifestation for which we are responsible. Can the meditations of our hearts be upon the true purpose of our living here, our function here, our service here? Can we begin to see the petty things for what they really are? Can we begin to see the important things for what they really are? The day of our letting go in a new cycle of rebirth, a new cycle of illumination. It shall surely come when I have finally found the adequate words of inspiration. When I have finally reached the point where I can give you adequate assurance that it is perfectly safe to let go, to step from the realm of the old world patterns into the realm of the new. Someday, I have faith it shall appear, that we may be with one accord in one place.
Hi. I had to unmute myself. I want to follow up on the imagery that Susannah just shared with us. I was thinking that it's not such an impossible thing to imagine us sitting, for instance, with 120 at the day of Pentecost, or that we would invite Yolanda to sit here in our fireside chat this evening, or that we would have Martin come along and be with us. I mean, what's so different than the fact that I'm in your living room? I know Martin once gave a service called something like the creative use of imagination. And I think we can use that. I think we're free to use that. Our consciousness is capable of doing that. So as Susannah was saying, it's the eternal voice that speaks through all of us, and we can make these beings who were present in form on earth, we can use our creative imaginations in order to realize that we are incarnate now, and it is our job that they have left for us. So anyway, thank you, Susannah. I just loved your cut and paste idea. So may that prayer that Yolanda offered up also be ours as we honor his awakening. And it's good to bring in the Lord and King, his Lord and King, our Lord and King right now. And particularly, I've been thinking about the temptations that the Master went through in the desert after 40 days of fasting. Now, we haven't been required to fast for 40 days. It probably took that long for his subconscious to be vulnerable to the tests that were brought. But we certainly have the experience of facing these feelings that arise in our own expression as we continue the work here. And 9 years ago, Martin gave a service called Let Ceilings Be Broken. And he quoted from Matthew, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time. No, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." So that we've heard this quote before, and it's probably been a topic of conversation or thinking. But one thing we can say is that this is a very definite statement. And indeed, there have been millions of human beings who have suffered terrible things on earth. But there has been no fulfillment, actually, of these words. Just a hint of what was coming. That was actually a quote from Martin. And we can certainly agree with him that in these days, we are seeing the power of love in its creative ways, but also very much in the destructive ways, which the power of love will bring. Continuing with Martin, the intensity of that which shall appear is absolutely dependent on what human beings do, what we do. And it depends also upon those who have begun to awaken, who have the opportunity of sharing a vision, and who are offered the privilege of participating in that which may establish a divine control pattern on earth. Continuing, there are many things which need to be seen in relationship to this control pattern and what is required from the standpoint of the divine machinery. It is what we do in relationship to what we see that determines any value such vision may have. And we always find ourselves, when we consider our ministry as a whole, up against certain ceilings. We keep coming up against them over and over again, simply because those who are charged with the responsibility insist upon maintaining the old patterns of human approach, subjection to the things of this world, the mass consciousness of humanity. And the only thing that can deal with it is the power of God. And the power of God to manifest on earth creatively, not just as a consuming fire, must have an instrument on earth that is under control through which it may work. Then it may be used on earth on a controlled basis to achieve the divine purposes. And we must keep moving through every ceiling so that we do not get stuck anywhere, so that we do not persist in maintaining human patterns of limitation which keep us from coming under control, so that the power of God may be used. I think that meditation, that excerpt requires some meditation on our part. I think that we have seen certain feelings that have arisen in our collective function, but most importantly for us right now, let's look at the feelings that arise in our own experience. I think that these feelings are often a subconscious one, things that come up from our subconscious that we don't even actually think about. It comes up as a feeling or a thought, and it's so easily just avoided or skimmed over, when actually what's taking place is that there's a feeling that's been made present. And these are the things that we have been petitioned to clear through, just as the Master did. He cleared through all those feelings in his life, in his experience. And what can we not expect exactly that commission in our lives? Those of us who have been offered the ample petition from the Lord to continue his work. I think that there's a lot that we can examine in our own experience, subtleties. And a lot of times, these feelings that we meet, rather unconsciously often, are built right into the fabric of our culture, that right into the way things are designed, set up. Everything is built and created to continue that lie. And so we who understand the necessity of moving through these feelings have the call to be absolutely diligent to see through this. And sometimes it takes whacking your head against the ceiling, doesn't it? To recognize with some humility that this isn't working. This isn't working for anyone. And we need to, in moments of a prayer, you might say, to call on the strength of the collective and call on the victory of the Master to be around us and in us, and to listen to the voice that is inside of all of us. That voice is inside of us if we will just listen. As we used to teach kids, the conscience compass, that voice of what is actually the right thing to do is present. Now we can say that we live in heaven, right? I live in heaven. I deal with the world from my heaven. But sometimes we have to examine what that heaven is. Is it the same heaven as somebody else's heaven? Maybe it wouldn't be the same heaven. Is it the emissary heaven that we have kind of programmed ourselves to operate under? So there are different levels of heaven that I think that we can think about. There are tons of heavens. There are heavens that contain impurities, and people are working from their heaven. So it's up to us to be really vigilant that our heaven is real and honest. And I think too, as we move along, we might consider something that Martin actually brought up in a service called The Perspective of the King. He was pointing out that there's actually another level of heaven, which is presiding over the heavens below, the heavens over the earth. That's only one level, one stage of living out of heaven. But who are the ones who can be at the level that sees the whole map, the whole terrain below? And that's, I think, what we're starting to explore in our times together, to look at things from the King's perspective and to understand that someone has to be conscious at these levels. But in order to do that, you have to be clearing through the feelings that are given to us to have a victory over. Here's something that Martin said. Wherever a person keeps running into something repeatedly, he may know for sure he has established a ceiling for himself. He needs to take a good, honest look at his feelings, his attitudes, himself, so that there may be a centering in the right place, in God, in the Spirit of God. And having found that centering, let us stay there. Let us stay centered. How long should it take to reach a point where we are willing to stay centered? This has very little to do with all the changes that need to work out in the individual. We all have those. Anyone, though, can stay centered. Anyone. There are many things to be worked out, things that do not work, nor are they changed by just hoping they'll work out, until a person stays centered. Not just, oh, how wonderful. My questions are answered, and now I feel fine, and now I'm centered for 5 minutes. To stay centered, because it is only as we do stay centered that something really begins to happen. How strongly people feel about the things that they think are wrong. And anyone who insists upon letting feeling manifest in relationship to that is bound to establish a ceiling for himself. Oh, says our feeling realm and our mind, that's just too much work. I'm saying this. Well, we see the folly of accepting that lie of the tempter. So the world keeps moving along the lines that our master prognosticated because of this lethargic state and intense self-centeredness, which keeps human beings from seeing anything much beyond the ends of their noses. So I think I've raked you over the coals enough on that one. And we do have such a wonderful experience to be alert, to really be alert, and to catch those times when we so quickly fall back into the human level. Like, for instance, when you see that there's a ceiling that you've broken through, and one of the things that happens is, oh, shame. I feel shameful for having had that ceiling to break through. Or, and what happened there? You just plunked right back into the lie again. So even those times have to be caught. Let them go. let those times, let those feelings, those voices just disappear. There's really an incredible opportunity that has been waiting for us to fulfill. And is that too much? Is that too much to ask? I think not. Another service that Martin gave was called This Generation. This is a service that has been used in the Temple of Light before. Carol Smith spoke about it in 2021. And every time she speaks, actually, she brings up this particular theme, which is the fact that the generation has to be done in one, the restoration has to be done in one generation. Okay, here's what Martin said about that. You have been through some experience to bring you to this point, to enable you to emerge from the fallen state to the extent that you have. It has been quite a journey, hasn't it, to bring you to this point? You have had many experiences, passed through many things. You have known clearings of various sorts. All that has been put into you, so to speak, this is the Lord's investment in you. We cannot bequeath it to someone else, can we? It is something that is happening to us, not to anyone else. There isn't anything vicarious in this process. We have to know it for ourselves. And therefore, we must come all the way through if our lives are to have meaning, which is the divine purpose. Now, that has to be said again and again, that it is our own individual experience. We cannot kid anybody about this. This is what we are here to have and experience ourselves. We are personally responsible moving through these ceilings. Here's another thing that's pretty tough, actually, to look at. Martin said, well, we'll do it just so far. We couldn't possibly go all the way. But our children will then carry on from there. We delude ourselves because the children are only blessed, only receive a blessing if the generation who are the parents carry through. Now, I'm not speaking here of literal parents and children, although you can look at it that way, but I'm speaking about spiritual children and spiritual parents. Are we not, the generation that I'm speaking to, not the children of Martin and Yolanda? We are in that generation. And theirs was the generation of the master, the slipstream, you might say. So here we are, children. Is it not our responsibility to carry that victory strongly, accurately? And those that we meet, who you might say are another generation of the same generation, those are the ones that we're responsible for. And there are many in this gathering who are actively involved in welcoming those who are just beginning to be attracted to what it is we have to offer. It's a very deep subject, and I'm sure we've all thought of this. Now, here's something that might be of some relief. Martin continues, this is something that must work out in one generation, otherwise it doesn't. But it is not a matter of working out in one particular generation. It's that it is one generation of the victory. And how it works out is not something that we can predict. We don't know that. Why are we collectively gathering? Why are we interested in doing something together, in agreement, in patterns of agreement? It's because there needs to be a machinery for God on earth, incarnate in flesh, where the power of God can work through us in a controlled way. Here's what Martin said. Because man has been functioning in the fallen state, there has been no available instrument for the divine use. The power of God has been entirely excluded in the truly creative sense, but such as it has been able to appear has had to appear through fallen consciousness of human beings. The life force that is moving through people, that is, the power of God, is under the control of the fallen consciousness of human beings, and consequently, it has kept everything in a turmoil. The very moment that there begins to be something which is under God's control, the power of God can begin to move through that in a creative sense. There begins to be a shift, and we are here to share in letting that shift take place, actually. But unless we ourselves experience what it means to be under the dominion of God, unless we ourselves begin to discover and consequently experience what it means to function on the basis of divine consciousness, we cannot share in that which needs to be done. So that is our prayer today, tonight. That is why we come together and why we offer to the one that we love and the ones that we were taught by and the ones that we are being taught by now and the ones that we teach. This is why we are here, to provide that machinery so that the power of God can move through and have a creative result. It will have a result. And we can see that the fire of love, it burns what does not belong. And it's in the process of doing that. So as David was saying, we are here to participate in the creative process of that. Martin did his job. Here we are to provide the machinery. And that commission has not gone away. Don't let that fool you. That is part of the lie. Hear the voice inside, hear the voice I say, the voices that we say to each other. That is the voice to listen to. So it's really wonderful to be together and to honor this anniversary. It's wonderful to do so. It needs to happen. This was a monumental experience on Earth, the awakening of Yolanda. The whole course of history actually was potentially changed. Yes, it is changed. It did change. We are here to carry that generation. So I'd like to open up any comments that are forthcoming and love to hear from anyone who'd like to speak.
What a nourishing evening. Now is the time. Let us accept the challenge we were born to fulfill. Let us answer the Lord's Prayer. Let us dare to fulfill the Archangel's commission. This has been unknown, and it is the body's responsibility, the body of which we are part. Let's dare to discover what that means. Oh, we are worthy to accept the blessings which our master, Yolanda Martin, initiated on earth and challenged us to accept. Now they are our responsibility. What a joy to be with you all and to know the beauty of being which has come through each of you this evening. So let's accept and embody this commission. We've been trusted with this. They left the doors open. Let's go through. Let's discover. what it means.
When you knew me, as I have always known you, you agreed to this, to be with one accord in one place, revealing the quality and character of the one who sent us, to express love, truth, and life into every circumstance of our living. And when we come together in a gathering, all together, we know that each one is trustworthy to do this. And when we're not together, we know that there is a whole host, a heavenly host on earth, revealing the quality and character of God. I embrace each and every one of you. I give great good thanks for each and every one of you, and for many, many more around the world who are awakening and in their own way expressing this same quality of spirit. We came to get the job done. It will be done. Thy will, not mine, Lord, will be done on earth as it is in heaven, because we are here with one accord in one place. Thank you all.
Yeah, I'm very deeply pleased with all of you in one accord, with one place. Today, it's very natural for us, Jaeyoung and I, yeah, physically uh, accessible to this temple of light, especially the 93rd anniversary of Yolanda's beginning. It's a tremendous experience for me. So during this service, yeah, I wept. But anyway, in reality, I can walk with you to regenerate our real home. So I'm deeply appreciate David and Anne, and even Susannah, to have this space, heavenly space. Let me experience in this way. Yeah, thank you.
So I'd just like to ask David and Susannah if you have any concluding words. Susannah first.
The moment feels so full and uh, potently engaged that I hardly know how to speak into it. But there are a few essences, and I think I would just say that I feel real thankfulness for the grace of our Lord in extending this time to us to do this work over the ages. And also I feel an eagerness to further engage, further break through those ceilings in this generation that you spoke of so wonderfully, Anne, and to work collectively with all of you to answer the call, answer the invitation to what is actually the great cosmic love story of the ages that we're being welcomed into, and we've been duly inspired. So thank you all for this time.
Well, very beautiful, Susannah. Thank you for those fine finishing words. If Martin couldn't do it, I certainly can't do it. I heard a former emissary leader say that after there was a big scattering in the 1990s. Martin did do it. Martin did finish it. Martin and Yolanda brought forth the body of the Son of God, which is still growing and developing. But think about it. All those years with Martin, with Yolanda, and all those years of Martin diligently, with one goal in mind, and that is to bring forth a living body of people who would take responsibility for the work on earth. They came to bring that forth, and they did it to that point of development when Martin left. It's like my daughters or your sons. There's a certain point where they take up the responsibilities of living, don't need the presence of their father and their mother immediately to guide them in every right step that they have to take. That the tonal quality of their living would be in accord with the spirit of the family. That mother, father desired their children to bring forth. And they left, one might say, a body of people that in a collective sense was barely out of adolescence. And there was a massive scattering. And it took, the way I counted, almost 28 years for that to finally, the energy of that scattering to peter out and there to be the gathering once again in a new cycle of movement in the one generation. And that took place. And we've been moving in that maturing process. And great challenges in finding consistent pattern of leadership emerging that was actually in agreement, bringing it together out of that state of fragmentation into one leadership body, including all of us, but with the proper patterns of focalization in that body. And this is occurring. And this is what is bringing us to the point where there must be one accord in one place, so that that divine machinery is present and operational. And you look around and you see now men and women in this body, maybe you and me and others that we know, who are maturely accepting this responsibility to be in heaven with, in one accord, in one place, and let the Shekinah pattern in the overall sense of being be present as the guiding focus of that divine machinery. That begins to become evident. The evidence of that presence is beginning to show up, and it's making a big difference. Power is gathering. A sense of oneness is gathering. What looked like fragmented groupings of people, each going in their own way, in their own definition of what's occurring, that's beginning to come together. The sense of oneness and unity being proven out by men, proving out by men and women, and all of us together. I think it's necessary to mark that that is actually taking place at this point in our cycle. And it's something to note because it looked like it could never happen at one point, looking back, not too long ago. How could this possibly happen? There was so much bickering and fighting and squabbling and snarling and disagreement, outwardly and obviously present, and that is dissolving. And this new pattern of, well, Martin calls it machinery. I mean, Yolanda called it machinery of reality. Martin called it a control pattern. Certainly isn't absolutely in place, but I think it's wonderful that we could even speak these words and recognize that there is a new spirit blowing in the wind, in the air of the spirit here, because the fire and the light and the glory of life is changing things in the earth of our experience. And this is a wonderful thing to, I think, to bring to focus at this point. And in humility, give thanks to the Lord for drawing us up to the increasingly close to the apex of what Anne was referring to as the perspective of the King, with regard to what's working out in the heaven and the earth of our experience from that view. Now, none of us probably have that view from the apex, but closer to the mountaintop, closer to the apex, begin to see more clearly what's been happening in the regeneration of the substance of the new heaven and the new earth. So just glad to have this opportunity to say something and putting a bit of a capstone on what Anne and Susannah have brought so beautifully. Thank you, Susannah, for your loving spirit and your eloquence, and Anne for your strong presence, always cheerful as you move through ceilings and come through victoriously as you did so beautifully tonight. So Thank you. Stuart. Over to you.
David, before we close, might I offer something that is about the new spirit, the evidence of the new spirit that is moving?
Certainly.
Yeah. I so appreciate what was shared in this time, and I want to give something of a concrete example that is actually quite profound of the new spirit that is moving. And that is that in 3 services over 2 weeks ago in the Tone of Life, then 24 hours ago in the Korean service, and then in the Sunrise Ranch service with David Karsher this morning. In all these 3 services, Martin's prayer of being, the Lord's Prayer, was read. And it was read not as something Martin spoke, but owned by the individuals who spoke them as my prayer of being. And what you said, Susannah, about the prayer of the Lord, the longing of the Lord. When Martin wrote the Lord's Prayer, he wrote it not for himself, I felt, but for the body, that the body might reach a point where the body could actually speak those words and be those words together, and that would be the fulfillment of the prayer of oneness of the Lord 2,000 years ago, the prayer of the Lord through Yolanda, the prayer of the Lord through Martin. And I was very struck by the fact that this prayer was read, not only read, but spoken in the first person by John 2 weeks ago in the Tone of Life, by me last night in the Korean service, by David Karsher this morning in the Sunrise Ranch EDL service. And I want to read this, the prayer, the poem of Martin, and read it together in a way as our prayer, our words. Now, as Martin said, to the body of humanity. He gave it to us to live that and be that so that it could be spoken to the body of humanity. We are in heaven. The revelation of myself, of us, is holy. My kingdom, our kingdom comes because we are here. Our will is done in earth because our will is done in heaven. We give the bread of life in each moment of our living on earth. We forgive, and that forgiveness is received by those who share the spirit of forgiveness. We lead no one into tribulation, but deliver all evil into the creative cycle. For our is the kingdom present on earth because we are present on earth. We are the creative power of the word. And ours is the glory which results shining round about to be reflected by the world which we create in fulfillment of our Lord's Prayer.
So
Thanks,
beautiful, Eugen. So beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, David, Anne, and Susannah, and all for being together. Our next Temple of Light service will happen in 2 weeks' time on Sunday, September 28th at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, focused by Steve Ventola and assisted by me. So, blessings to you.